Good morning. This is Dr. Ranjit. I am heading the Department of Social Work at Engineering College. So today we are going to see the topic on sampling in social science research. So sampling. Before going into the sampling, we have to see what is population, because sampling is drawn from population. So what is population? It is the complete collection of all the data to be studied. So it is a complete element from which we are going to select the sample. So that is, we call it as population. And census. So whenever in research, if we are completely taking or considering the population for our study, then we call that as a census. And the sampling is a part from your population. So this is about the population, census and the sampling. So when we go into the population, we can see there are, we can call the population into various types. One thing is we call it as a theoretical population. Theoretical population is something which we cannot practically consider in our research. Theoretically, we can, for generalization purpose, we can have this theoretical population. So we can have a particular population as a theoretical population, but it is very difficult to have a complete set of data from this theoretical population. Then the next one is the study population. So this is the population from which we are going to draw our sample. And the theoretical population is the population to which we are going to generalize our results. And the sample frame is the list of what you call it as the list of elements from which we are going to select our samples. And finally, from the sampling frame, from the list of elements, we will draw the samples for our study. So this is about the types of population. And population can be divided into two. One is finite population. That means exactly we know the population size, the exact number of our population. And when we talk about infinite population, here the population size is unknown. For example, if you take a number of students studying in a college, we can have the exact population size, which is called as a finite population. And if we take how many people are watching a cricket game, so it is very difficult to have that population size. So that is called as infinite population. So what is sample? A sample is a small representative segment of a population. So it is a part of the population which may be randomly drawn or non-randomly drawn. So inference drawn from a sample are expected to be applicable for the source population. It is just we are trying to generalize. So from the sample is a part from that thing, what we are whatever the results we are getting, we will be generalizing to the population. And sampling, why we use sample to get information about a larger population, because it is very difficult to access the population as a whole. So that is the intention behind why we take samples. And on the other side, the number of samples which we are selecting, it is scientifically adequate to generalize the population. So that's why we go for sampling. And more accuracy, as I told you, it will be the same results we will be getting when we take the whole population for our study as well as the required sample. So both the results are same. So that's why we go for sampling rather than moving into the covering the whole population. And we have two types of sampling. We can divide the sampling into two types. One is probability and one is non-probability. So probability sampling is completely based on what you call it as a randomization, right? So randomization means that each of the element in the population is having equal chance to become your sample. So that is called as randomization. And non-probability sampling is non-random. So here based on the convenience or based on some purpose, the researcher decides to take the sample on their own. So that is called as non-probability sampling, and we have a lot of types of probability sampling. One is simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, area sampling, and multi-stage sampling. And under non-probability sampling we have judgmental sampling, convenience sampling, quota sampling, panel sampling, and snowball sampling. So we will see one by one. Simple random sampling, the terminology itself gives some idea about this kind of sampling procedure. Simple, no, it is a very simple procedure. No, we just randomize the elements and we take as a sample. For example, in a classroom of 100 students, if we want 30 students, we just write the name of all those 100 students and we will draw the 30 students randomly by means of lottery method, and there is another method which we use called a tippet table method. So these are the two methods through which we can we can go for this simple random sampling. And systematic random sampling, normally simple random sampling we use for a small population size, when the population size is small. So otherwise it will be a hectic job to do this simple random sampling. So whenever the population is a bit more, then we can adopt this systematic random sampling, because technically if we want to talk, if we see if there are 1,000 elements in the population, and if we want some 300, 400 as a sample, it is very difficult. No, it is a hectic job to write all the 1,000 elements or the names of the population, the students. For example, if the population are students, then it is very difficult for writing all the 1,000 names and picking up 300 from it. So that's why whenever the population size is some more big, then we get into this systematic random sampling. And as I told you, another technical point is, so we may not cover majority of our population. There is probability for that also when we take simple random sampling for huge number of population. So that's why. So we get into stratified random sampling. Stratified random sampling is nothing but when the population is heterogeneous, right? For example, if you want to cover if your population is college, then you can see there are a lot of departments, right? So the disciplines are different. So we can consider this as a heterogeneous population, right? So in such case, we should not go into the simple random or stratified random sampling. Instead, we move into this stratified random sampling. So here we divide the population into groups, and from each group we draw the samples. So here strata means group. So that's what regarding the stratified random sampling. And the next one is cluster sampling. So when the population is huge, if it is in, if for example, if our population is like a district or state like that, then we can have some sort of homogeneity among the population, and we divide them into clusters, right? Clusters also groups, homogeneous groups. And from each cluster we try to draw our samples. So this is called as cluster sample, which is normally used for large number of data, I mean population. And multi-stage, it is also a type of cluster sampling. We call it as multi-stage cluster sampling. Here we can divide the whole population into different groups, where in each stage of the clustering we randomly take some clusters. For example, if it is a district, then it is divided into what you call it as taluks, and we randomly take some taluk. Then taluk is divided into blocks, then randomly we take some blocks. Like that till the hamlets or the villages, we can consider those things as a sample for our study. So this is called as multi-stage cluster sampling. And this is about the non-probability sampling convenience. So this is based on the convenience of the a researcher, right? So based on the availability of the respondents, the researcher conveniently try to adopt his sample from the population. And judgmental or purposive sampling, so purposefully the researcher selects his sample from the population. This is called as purposive or judgmental sampling. Next one is snowball or relay sampling. So in some studies it is very difficult to get the sampling from the population. So through reference, through one-to-one, so that is a kind of sampling, we call it as snowball sampling. And if you see some of the characteristics of good sampling, how a sample should be, a good sample should have the characteristics of representativeness. So there should be no adequate representation of your population. So if adequate representation is not there, we are not going to get a valid result or a scientific result. And adequacy, it is the size of your population is also equally important, because based on the population size we have to determine the sample size. So adequacy is also equally important. And the more homogeneous the population, if the population is highly homogeneous, then the sample size may be less or small according to that. And if the population is more heterogeneous, then we have to go for more number of samples. So this is about it. And how large should be a sample? It is a question which is asked by the research scholars. So normally most research scholars find it difficult to determine the sample size. And if you see the Kirgis and Morgan 1970, they have come with a tabulation based on a formula. So the formula is this one. So based on this formula, they have made a table, a consolidated table. So the scholars may just get into it and find their population size, and whatever they have, whatever the size they have to take it for their population, they can view from that table. For example, this is the table of the Morgan. This N denotes the sample, population, and S denotes the sample. And if you see, if your population size is 10, then we have to take 10 samples. So like this, for the number of population size, they have consolidated this table. So the scholars may just get into it and find their population size and determine their required samples. So with this, I am just concluding this session. Thank you very much.